I've always had a passion for being around and learning about animals. When I was younger, going to zoos and animal parks was always a part of my life. I wanted to share my passion with family and friends, so I started working with people that loved animals as much as I did, and my YouTube channel was born.
Welcome back to my animal education series. Today I'm here with Dr. Dave at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Hello.
Hi.
So what do you do here at SIUE?
Well, mostly I'm a professor. I teach a bunch of anatomy classes, and I also teach herpetology, which is the study of amphibians and reptiles. And that's what I've kind of worked on for most of my career, is frogs and lizards.
So what kind of work have you done with herpetology in the past?
Well, I started, the first project I did was I studied a tropical frog from Puerto Rico, and they were really interesting because they don't have tadpoles like most frogs do. They lay their eggs on land, and then the male frog sits on them for about 3 weeks until they hatch. They hatch out as tiny little frogs about the size of a pencil eraser, but they're fully formed legs and they just hop away.
How big are these frogs as adults?
As adults, well, the females are a little bit bigger than the males. So females are about this size and the males are kind of much smaller. But when you go to Puerto Rico, the frogs are everywhere and they're really, really loud. In fact, they're causing a problem in Hawaii, so they've escaped and gotten to Hawaii, and they're so loud that people are starting to complain that they can't hear the insects or the birds anymore because of the frogs.
That's a complaint that I would not have. I
Right.
love hearing frogs.
Yeah, they're pretty impressive.
So doing your research, what have you found out about these frogs?
Well, I mostly studied how they skip the tadpole stage, and so I found out about thyroid hormone, which is a hormone that causes tadpoles to change into frogs, and so I looked at how that might be altered in these frogs. And also their bodies form a little bit differently, and that they never form a tadpole tail, and they never have gills. They have a tail, but it's used for breathing, not swimming. So it's kind of interesting that way.
They're very interesting frogs.
Yeah, they are very nice, yeah. And there's, that kind of frog is all over the tropics, so it's found in lots of different places.
And you're also saying earlier that you're doing research with spiny-tailed lizards and tree lizards.
Right. So after I was done working on the frog from Puerto Rico, I moved to Arizona, where there's so many different kinds of lizards, and they're really common. And so the one that I worked on was known as a tree lizard. And mostly where we found them, they live in like people's backyards, and they climb up all the block walls and things like that. They get about, 4 or 5 inches long. And the most interesting thing about them was that the males have different color throats. And so some males have like a orange with a big blue circle in the middle, and other males just have orange throats. And what they do is they use those to communicate. And so they'll do like push-ups, and then they'll show their throat to say, okay, this is my territory, and I have to stay away. Right. And so the ones with the blue dot are more dominant and territorial than the ones that don't have the blue dots.
Would that be like a genetic thing, or?
That's a really good question. That it seems like it's partially genetic, but environment also plays kind of a role in how intense the coloration is and things like that. And the other interesting thing is that in some years it's really good to be a blue-throated lizard, but in other years it's better to be an orange-throated lizard. And so they both kind of succeed, but they succeed in different ways.
And how long were you researching these lizards?
I worked on those lizards for probably 4 or 5 years, because there was a lot that wasn't known about them. And so we studied a lot of kind of newly hatched lizards, again, to see if it was a genetic kind of component and whether you could change which type of lizard they were by treating them with hormones and things like that. So we were really interested in kind of how they became blue males or orange males.
And to the spiny-tailed lizards, what did you find really unique about those lizards?
Right. So there's a lot of spiny-tailed lizards. So that there's a whole bunch in the southwestern United States, and they go all the way down into Mexico and into Central America. So there's a huge number of different types of those lizards. The one that I worked on was a pretty big one. It gets probably about this size, and it was called Scaloporus yarubi, is its scientific name. But it lives up on mountaintops, and unlike most lizards, it doesn't lay eggs. Instead, the female gives birth to tiny little baby lizards. So most lizards lay eggs.
That's very different than most lizards.
Right. And it's actually kind of more like what mammals do, right? Because we give birth to live young, just like this lizard does. And so the person I was working with was interested in kind of how similar those lizards were to kind of how mammals reproduce. It turns out they're way more similar than you might think.
In what ways are they similar?
Well,
in what ways are they similar?
They have a structure called a placenta, which helps, so they don't have a lot of yolk in the eggs, and so instead what mom eats goes through the placenta and feeds the baby, right? So and that's how mammals do it, right? Yeah.
And how like with most reptile and amphibian eggs, there's a defined outer casing.
Right.
So is that kind of the same for these?
Right. Well, they do kind of have all of those layers, but they're much thinner. So that their eggshell is much thinner and easier for things like oxygen and nutrients to get across the eggshell.
And also probably has to affect the mother while she's moving.
Right.
It's a solid thing inside of you. It's not very good.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And and it's interesting because the females they'll change their behavior. So when they're pregnant, they'll lay out in the sun more because it makes the babies develop faster, and so they spend a shorter time being pregnant, which is good because they're way easier to catch when they can't move very fast. Yeah.
So we've talked about like what you worked on in the past, but what are you currently working on?
So currently now I have kind of two different projects. One is a field project where I'm kind of looking at ponds here on campus, and so there's a whole bunch of different ponds, and some of them are permanent ponds and some of them are temporary, and so I've been looking at how amphibians actually use them. So I do surveys starting in kind of March all the way through Thanksgiving, where I check and see who's there and what adults are there and what tadpoles are there, and I found probably 6 or 7 different species of frogs and a couple of species of salamanders. But you can see that it really varies when they show up at the ponds and how long they stay. So toads come in March and they're done and gone by April, and bullfrogs are there kind of almost all year round. Salamanders come in the spring and in the fall, but never in the summer. And so it's kind of interesting to figure out why they do that and kind of what's going on that way.
And you're explaining like beforehand, that there's different numbers of adult bullfrogs and tadpoles in the ponds.
Yeah, so even though the ponds, they're all fairly close together, the frogs that live in them are very different, particularly at some times of the year. Like you're saying, there's one pond in the sun that has lots of bullfrog tadpoles in it, but very few adult bullfrogs. And the pond that's in the woods has lots of adult bullfrogs, but almost no bullfrog tadpoles at all.
Do you think the amount of light has anything to do with that? Maybe like hiding from predators?
I think it might. I think it also has to do with the fact that the pond in the woods, it loses its oxygen in the summer, and so the tadpoles live underwater, right? And so if the water doesn't have any oxygen in it, they're going to suffocate. Yeah. And so maybe they try and breed in there, but they're never successful because all the oxygen goes away. Whereas in the pond in the sun, the oxygen stays like all summer long, and so they do just fine.
That's very interesting because you would just see 2 ponds and like, oh yeah, they're probably the same.
Right.
But the amount of light and everything probably majorly changes the ecosystem of the pond.
Yeah. And we're still kind of working on why the ponds are different that way. I set up some traps to see if they were moving from one pond to another. So maybe they live in one place and they actually lay their eggs in another place. Mm-hmm. But I haven't really seen much movement at all, so I still don't know what's going on.
Maybe the tadpoles grow up in the one pond, and once they reach more of an adult phase, they go over to the other one.
Yep, they move out and go to the other pond.
Mm-hmm. For example, like a predatory bird might not be going after like tadpoles, but once it goes up to the bigger frogs, they have to move out to a more like secluded area.
Certainly, yeah, that's a good possibility.
And how far away are these ponds?
They're actually right here on campus, and so they're less than half a mile from where we're sitting right now.
So, how far away are they from each other?
The ponds are actually really close to each other. They're probably about 100 feet,
wow.
150 feet between them. Yeah, it's really close together.
That's pretty amazing for the amount of changes in between for only 100 to 150 feet.
Yeah, because a frog could go that distance in probably 15 or 20 minutes or something like that.
That's not difficult at all for them.
Yeah.
Because frogs move between ponds and streams like normally.
Yeah.
Especially at this distance, it's probably nothing for them.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. Like I'm probably curious to see like what else you would find from that.
Right. Yeah, that we've started to see if it's related to temperature of the water or when rainfall, and so I've been doing it for 2.5 years now, and I have never had a year that's been the same. Right, so every year is different. So like last year, I had so many tree frogs that I thought, oh, that this is going to happen every year. And this year I've hardly caught any. But I had way more leopard frogs this year than I've ever had in the past, and way more salamanders.
Yeah, you're seeing over 300 salamanders.
Yeah, I had over 300. Yeah, in 2 days I had over 300
incredible.
salamanders. Yeah, I've never seen that many in my whole life.
I don't think I've seen even close to 100 salamanders in my life.
Yeah.
I would go looking for them often.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us
You're
about
quite
your
welcome.
research.
It was good talking to you.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what else you find about that project.
Great, thank you.
And if you guys enjoyed this week's episode, don't forget to leave a big thumbs up down below, subscribe to my channel, and also check out my Instagram @ColeShirk. And as always, I'll see you next week.